right, good afternoon and welcome to Market View. It's 2 p.m. Central African time and I'm Sifiso Ngumalo, happy to be your host this afternoon. It is Easter Monday and we begin with a major development in regional digital transformation. The Kingdom of Eswatini is among beneficiaries of COMESA's new digitalization initiative that is backed by a whopping $2.5 billion investment from the World Bank. Now, the IDEA program aims to connect 180 million people, yes, 180 million people to the internet, as well as expand digital services to 100 million more across Eastern as well as the Southern of Africa. Now, we unpack what this means for Eswatini's connectivity, business growth, the digital inclusion goals that the kingdom has. And then, of course, the Ministry of Health is navigating serious funding pressure. After recent cuts in support from US aid, the Ministry of Finance says under 100 million emalangeni is now needed to close critical gaps. We examine what this shortfall means for public health as well as national finances. And then we'll go to our Enterprise Watch segment where VAT is under the spotlight. South Africa is considering a potential increase to 15.5% by May 1st. All eyes are on the Kingdom of Eswatini. Now, given our history of aligning VAT policies with SA, cooled local consumers and businesses face similar adjustments. Our economist, Sanela Sbia, joins us live in studio to explore what this means for revenue projections, the cost of living, and the regional trade dynamics. And then, of course, per usual, we cap off the show with our market analysis as well as we look at our key movements across Asian indices, gold and oil prices, as well as currency shifts, including how the Lilangeni is performing against major global currencies. This is Market View, your essential guide to the numbers, the policies, as well as the trends shaping Eswatini's economy. Let's get started. On our first story, the Ministry of Health is seeking under 100 million emalangeni to address funding gaps that are caused by recent cuts in foreign aid from the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID. Now, this was revealed by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Neil Reichenberg, while responding to questions on the country's economic outlook following the introduction of new tariffs and the reduction of USAID support.
The Minister for Finance, Honorable Neil Reichenberg, has responded on how Eswatini is adjusting its fiscal outlook or revenue expectations now that the country faces trade pressures from the US. The South African Reserve Bank recently warned that should its worst-case scenario play out, influenced by the US tariffs, gross domestic product could shrink by about 0.69% instead of the gain of 1.7% it hopes for. South Africa is the largest trading partner for Eswatini.
So first of all, the USAID cut, the Ministry of Health is doing quite a deep analysis on what that means and is coming to request some funding for the filling of certain gaps that have opened because of that, which we feel as government are quite critical. And so, but fortunately, it is below 100 million, which they're asking for. And we do have a contingency fund in this budget of 350 million emalangeni. So we don't have to do any budget changes. We believe that we can just use the money in the contingency fund.
The minister has further responded on what adjustments, if any, are being made to Eswatini's macroeconomic assumptions and fiscal framework in response to these regional economic signals.
At the moment, we are not making any macro changes to our economy because of the fact that the implications are not looking that severe to be able to make a change from. So at the moment, obviously changing from about, the outlook is changing from a positive 1% growth to maybe a possible negative below 1% growth even. So at the moment, we're going to maintain our fiscal outlooks based on what is happening there. Even SACU, it means that SACU probably won't be growing. But again, because we have the SACU Stabilization Fund, which still has about 2.25 billion in it. At the end of the year, it'll probably have just above 1.5 billion. But anyway, whatever happens on the SACU front, we believe should be able to be cushioned because that small change should not have a significant impact on SACU either.
Honorable Neil Rickenberg stated that the government is working on measures to mitigate the impact of the cuts, especially in the health sector, which relied heavily on US aid funding for various critical programs. For Market View, Nelson Dlangamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa, Babane.
Eswatini is one of the countries that will benefit from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa's Inclusive Digitalization for East and Southern Africa program, that is also known as IDEA. Now, the initiative that is funded by the World Bank to the tune of $2.5 billion, which is over 46 billion emalangeni, aims to empower 180 million people with internet access and to provide digitally enabled services to 100 million people across the region over the next 8 years.
According to a statement issued by COMESA, the first phase includes a 187 million emalangeni grant for the COMESA Secretariat and about 14.6 billion emalangeni in financing for operations in Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Malawi. The program is expected to bring together over 15 countries, regional economic communities, and development partners under one program to achieve the common goal of digital access and leverage it for productive use over an 8-year period. Under COMESA, the program will foster enabling environment for internet access and usage, which will drive inclusive growth and job creation in the region. COMESA will lead the regional coordination and facilitate the knowledge exchange of experiences and lessons across participating countries. According to COMESA, the program places emphasis on increasing private sector investment and will help enhance the regional policy and regulatory environment, provide projection preparation support, ensure gender dimensions and climate change considerations to offer holistic approach to digital access interventions. Currently in Eastern and Southern Africa, only 64% of the population is covered by high-speed internet, and less than half, only 24%, are using the internet as of 2023. Isabel, Practice Manager for Digital Transformation in Eastern and Southern Africa from the World Bank, said the program is a bold response to these challenges, aiming to advance in faster, bigger and smarter ways. The goal of the Inclusive Digitalization for Eastern and Southern Africa program is to transform the digital landscape in Eastern and Southern Africa, shifting from benefiting a few to benefiting all. At the core of the program is the goal to leverage regional economies of scale and knowledge sharing to enable private sector investment and result at scale. By reducing market fragmentation and fostering a more integrated digital landscape, the program creates opportunities for businesses to expand and innovate across the region. Secretary General of COMESA highlighted the need for collaboration and learning among various institutions to bridge the funding gap and achieve the desired digital access levels. She adds that innovative ways to catalyze private sector investment, enhancing the policy regulatory frameworks, project preparation support, gender dimensions, and climate change are all part of the program's transformational agenda. For Market View, Nelson Dlangamandla, visuals from the COMESA website.
That is how we end our business news segment. We speak to Sanelus B, our economist, after the break. We want to really understand Eswatini's VAT alignment as well as the economic implications with South Africa's plans to incrementally increase its VAT rate by 0.5 percentage points in 2005 and again in 2006 after the break.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Market View. This is the Easter Monday edition. Let's look at now this development in South Africa, where as the 1st of May approaches, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty over what will happen to value-added tax in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Now, on the 1st of May, South Africa might change the VAT to 15.5%. However, there is a lot of uncertainty given that the budget was passed with a proviso that Finance Minister in South Africa, Enoch Gondongwana, had to go and find other alternative sources of revenue to offset the expected VAT increase, in revenue. Eswatini has historically aligned its VAT rates with South Africa to ensure regional consistency and ease of trade. Economist Sanele Sibia is in studio now and is going to give us some insights on what this means for Eswatini's revenue projections. Sanele, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir.
When I hear about this alignment, I cannot help but be concerned. I'm here representing the many people of Eswatini, and these are some of the questions that they're asking themselves. I think the first one is how this alignment might affect household spending and consumer behavior, especially among low-income groups.
So that's the tricky component of this entire thing. There's a lot of moving parts, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty. We are actually not sure what is going to happen because if you follow the news, just as of yesterday, Minister Gondongwana seemed to be reneging on that, right? And then again, when you look at the plan provided by the South African Revenue Services, it seems to suggest that this is something that will just take 2 months and then it gets reversed. So it really becomes difficult in terms of what Eswatini should do, because it seems our revenue policy is largely linked to what South Africa does, actually all SACU countries. So right now, I bet it's quite difficult to be in the minister's shoes and looking at all these moving parts and not knowing what will happen. Even if it does come, it's going to come for 2 months, and what it means for planning. So again, what then it means is it becomes quite problematic for households also to do their planning. We are not sure whether to plan for a contingent increase or to plan for things staying the same. So there's a lot of that uncertainty, which is basically not good for consumer spending. You might hold on to money and then you find it's not coming. You might start playing around with your consumption bundles and choices. Again, you find that it's not coming, and that'll have a negative impact, say, on commerce, because if we are all trying to double down on our expenditures, then that means the economy slows down a bit, which is one of the concerns that the Democratic Alliance and the EFF have in terms of these increases. So it's a bit tricky, but if it does go through, households should prepare for a bit of an additional burden in terms of the cost of living pressures that we're already feeling, because VAT is a consumption tax.
Let's come out of the household, no pun intended, and look at the sort of the fiscal stance or standpoint of the Kingdom of Eswatini in itself in terms of the revenue projections there. Are there any fiscal benefits for the Kingdom of Eswatini if it aligns with this VAT increase? And most importantly, how this might influence public service funding?
So that's another moving part that the minister needs to try and balance, right? Because if the VAT if South Africa increases the VAT, that's going to be what I call a political gift to the minister, where he has this additional revenue coming in, which he had not projected, right? But right now it becomes a tad bit difficult for the minister to do his planning and projections in terms of where the money is supposed to come from and where it's supposed to go. For example, we know that in the budget presented in February, there were quite a number of loans listed there because just to try and balance the budget. But right now, if you're getting this additional source of revenue coming in, which was not budgeted for, by the way, that's another tricky bit. It wasn't, they didn't plan for it. It just wasn't there. So that we might expect him, I for one would expect him to present a new budget to Parliament saying that, okay, now with this 0.5%, this is how I'm now balancing things. So right now there's quite a lot of balancing that needs to happen, and it's not happening with all this uncertainty. So that's quite difficult.
What is ideal for Sanele Sibiya as an economist, from your own perspective? Because like you have said, there are different moving pieces here. Household spending looks like it's receiving the brunt of it all. It's painful. But the flip side is the ministry could enjoy, this development. What would be ideal here?
The ideal situation is for the minister to be able to plan adequately. So that government in themselves, Parliament in themselves would now be able to have a good grasp of what they are controlling and what they are not controlling. So right now what this presents is a situation where you have additional funding into the government's coffers, which the ministers have not approved, or they'll approve it post facto, right? And once you do that, then it becomes a bit difficult to control the budget. I, for one, would have expected that if the minister somehow sees this coming, he would actually just say, I'm not going to take this much loan from that institution because that's now going to be covered by this revenue, unexpected revenue windfall. Right. So that's why one I would be looking into. And then secondly, it's an issue of how do you balance with the household sector that is already facing serious cost of living challenges. Right? Yeah, it's quite bad. And we do expect that probably if he gets that political gift, that should somehow adjust for that salary review. So people would be expecting a bit of tulatula, and that would somehow go to ease that cost of living pressure within households. So it's just a balancing act, which is quite difficult to balance when you have one moving ball that might just come and unsettle the water.
A fixed salary review, not necessarily a one-time tulatula. That is. Yeah. Interesting. We do have a bit of a minute left before we get into our market analysis, and I do want us to look into policy considerations or mitigation measures. Let me see. Let's do mitigation measures. Plans to introduce maybe or expand zero-rated items, particularly on, essential goods.
Depends on what you term essential, Mr. Nxumalo.
Of course.
That's the argument there, to say nobody can live on that. People want meat. You can't live on offals every day, right? So it's something that makes the life of Liswati really worth it, where a person can have that meal and they would say, I've had a meal, right? Nobody can live on beans on a daily basis. Absolutely. So if we expand and we keep it at the bare minimum without adding one of the commodities that we think are luxury, then really we're saying the poor should bear a bigger brunt of this VAT increase, because they would still want to eat that red meat at some point, and it's still going to have that VAT attached to it.
We have global economics indicators in Eswatini's outlook on our market analysis after the break, from looking at now the VAT alignment, what we should brace for if this stays or it goes in South Africa. As there's a lot of uncertainty, as Sanele says. We don't know what is really going to happen, but at least we do have some recommendations of what to really do to position ourselves better. Let's go straight into our market analysis.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit 6. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. This is our market analysis segment on Market View. As you must be able to predict now, if we are going to say anything about gold prices, record highs. It's probably going to be a record high again tomorrow, a new record high every day. And that is exactly the conversation where it sits as we start our conversation with Sanele and, really drill into what these numbers are telling us. Even though on Friday, Sanele, we have been what we can call a Easter holiday even for the markets, but not so much for gold prices. We have seen a new record high here, $3,391.62 US per ounce. I really want to understand, what is driving this surge. Pretty much the same story that you've been telling us.
Pretty much the same story, in terms of the tariff story, the trade war. We're seeing China retaliating. We're seeing the likes of your Japan, the UKs, the European Union, all trying to scramble to the negotiating table, trying to come up with a deal. So there's just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of moving parts within the global economy, right? And as you said, gold doesn't sleep because it's a commodity that's traded across the globe, right? So we're just constantly looking up at market sentiments. So one quite interesting that came out for me and that stuck up for me was on Friday when President Trump said, after Jerome Powell's comments in terms of the monetary policy stance in the U.S., saying that it's going to keep that base rate steady, right? So President Trump came and said they must cut interest rate. It must have been coming down for the past so many months. They are not playing fair. They are attacking us. So now this is an institution that's supposed to be independent, the Federal Reserve Bank. Yeah. The administration ought not to have any control or any say in
That's what Powell is saying. He's saying we are not going to flinch.
So right now we're looking at that, whether we're going to see Trump coming into that space and trying to influence what is going to happen there. So coming out of the long weekend, that is why gold is sitting at 3,400. That's an all-time high. I think we last saw such figures way back in 2004-05 when I was still in high school. Yeah. Right.
I do want us to, really drill into this gold conversation because obviously, you speak about the exchange rate conversation and our viewers at home, let me just clarify this. The reason why we are not delving much into, the other markets is because they haven't changed. They've been on holiday. So it's pretty much exactly what we spoke about last week, Thursday. Literally no changes at all. But mainland China has seen some changes, minimal change with Brent crude. We are seeing prices decline here. Is it oversupply? Is it the potential increases in Iranian oil exports? What are the implications for Eswatini's fuel prices and inflation rates?
So in terms of the fuel price, Mr. Ngumalo, remember when we project inflation, we project it based on the average. It's not like the daily movement. So initially, when the year started, we had projected around the 70-something, dollars per barrel in terms of the gold of the world standard Brent crude. But right now, those numbers have since come down to say around that 65 mark because of this exchange rate of this trade war that is happening across the globe, which is somehow expected to slow markets down. So that's one of the bit of the tricky stories. But when you look at the figures coming out of China, just today we saw China actually posting growth figures that surpassed expectations. So that shows a bit of resilience coming through from China, and we do expect that to drive a bit of that growth, with also even affecting that Brent crude oil, right? And we're seeing that resilience, and coming out of China again has been a story around retaliation. China has actually come out to say, we are going to retaliate not only against the U.S. now.
They've been doing great.
Yeah, it's not only against the U.S., but against everyone else who seems to be in concert and, aiding the U.S. in this trade war. So we're seeing that it may likely, take a tangent from being a China-U.S. type of thing to being a China and U.S. allies type of thing, not just focusing on the U.S. alone. So that's another moving target that we are looking into what's going to happen right there.
Are we able to glean in terms of, some of the global investments that we are seeing in mainland China or in just Asia, to be specific, in terms of the trends there, as well as some of the potential opportunities that could come out of that for the Kingdom of Eswatini?
So when we look at what has been happening in terms of the China-Asia story there, we're seeing China really taking into that space and going out and trying to negotiate with the Asian countries to say, no, stick with us because America is this unpredictable economy. But what we've seen happen within Asia, countries like the like of Vietnam, your Singapore's, they seem to want to agree but also not antagonize the U.S. So we do have a bit of that happening within Asia. And then when it comes to what should actually likely happen to Eswatini, Mr. Nxumalo, is we should be worried. Because we know that China is the global manufacturer, right? So now, if they lose that U.S. market, remember the U.S. is the biggest consumer market across the globe. So if they use that U.S. market, they're going to have to find markets elsewhere. And that's where we are going to see a situation of dumping. And when we have those commodities coming through from China at very low costs, so the domestic industries are going to suffer. So we need to be careful. And we also do need to start thinking of ways we are going to protect our borders in case that happens, right? In case America and China don't strike a deal. So
what does protecting our borders mean?
It means putting in a tariff, putting in a quota, like barring certain commodities from coming in, saying, no, this is not coming in because we are protecting this industry. Because dumping usually is good in the short term, where we see consumers benefiting, but then it tends to kill local industry, and then consumers start losing jobs because the consumer is also an employee somewhere, and we see the domestic industries coming out of business. So we should be worried a bit about that dumping type of situation.
So if you were to propose strategies that we should really look into as Eswatini to bolster our economic resilience as well as to capitalize on emerging opportunities, would be just, to be, of course, the Minister of Commerce did say that they will be in conversation with the U.S. and, with every emerging development that happens there. So with this one in China, we should, be on standby on our borders to implement those measures.
Yeah, given the bilateral stance between Eswatini and China, we can only be on standby and think around how we can protect the local industry, because our bilaterals with China. So
that phrase that annoys a lot of people on X, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. We are monitoring the situation that is normally, posted by the Eswatini government. It's exactly what the government should be doing, and people should really read that with understanding and really study the whole markets and, the economic landscape of the globe right now. We should monitor the situation.
We should monitor the situation, but not only monitor. Always have a contingency plan to say, should this happen? It's quite scary for me that we've not seen the ministry coming up with worst-case scenarios, best-case scenarios, presenting what each situation would look like.
As time has elapsed, I think our parting shot is that I think they have made those assessments. Can they be published? Can they be presented for the public? We need to have those conversations on the show, those best and worst case scenarios for these current economic situation in the globe. Thank you for staying with us on Market View. This has been the Easter Monday edition. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
We heard the French President Emmanuel Macron paying tribute to the Pope earlier today. What other tributes have come in from around France to the Pope?
Well, tributes have been pouring in across France, of course, as a Catholic country, and really also across the political spectrum. Macron said that throughout his pontificate, Pope Francis has always sided with the most vulnerable and the most fragile, and that he did this with a lot of humility. In this time of war and brutality, he had a sense for the other, for the most fragile. We also heard from François Bayrou, the Prime Minister of France, who praised the historical approach of the Pope, which caused a tipping point within the church. This evening, the Eiffel Tower won't be lit in his honor, and the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, also said that she would like to name a place in Paris after Pope Francis in his honor.
Emerald, thank you for that. Emerald Maxwell reporting for us from Notre Dame Cathedral. Well, Pope Francis, originally from Argentina, died weeks after he survived a near-fatal bout of double pneumonia. He actually was the first ever pope from Latin America when he was elected in 2013. Our Jenny Shin takes a look back at his papacy.
The white smoke spiraling from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel made Jorge Maria Bergoglio the first non-European pope in 1300 years. Born in Argentina in 1936 to Italian immigrant parents, he grew up in a modest family in Buenos Aires. During his studies, Jorge Bergoglio worked as a janitor and a nightclub bouncer, an unusual profile, but one that didn't prevent him from climbing the ladder within the church. He was appointed bishop, then archbishop, before being appointed as Cardinal of Buenos Aires in 2001. Nicknamed Prince of the Poor, he made clear he wouldn't live in the Vatican like his predecessors, instead choosing to reside at St. Martha's Guest House with other clergy members.
I was wondering, why did you give up all the wealth of a pope?
I have a need to live among the people.
For his first visit outside Rome, the pontiff chose the Italian island of Lampedusa, where thousands of migrants died attempting to reach its shores. Pope Francis also spoke out for societal stances like homosexuality.
If a person is gay and willingly seeks the Lord, who am I to judge?
Whilst it was a change in message, it wasn't a change in doctrine, as the Vatican reaffirmed that homosexuality is a sin. Pope Francis's statements have been controversial within the Catholic Church, who have tried to maintain unity within it. In February 2019, the Pope held an unprecedented international summit where he said that the Church was ready to take responsibility for abuse against children.
The Church will do whatever is necessary to bring to justice anyone who has committed such crimes.
Pope Francis also emphasized a more inclusive Catholic Church, but this earned him criticism of conservatives who accused him of diluting the Church's teachings. And a stinging criticism of the Curia, the Church's central government, meant many in the Vatican have long wanted to see him go. After an exhausting journey to Canada in July, he hinted he might follow the unusual example set by his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, and resign from the role.
This, with all honesty, is not a catastrophe. There can be a change of popes.
For his critics, Francis did not behave like a pope should. But his supporters will remember him for his simplicity, vibrant personality, and his empathy for the poor.
France 24's Rome correspondent Seema Gupta has been keeping a close eye on the latest developments for us from the Vatican. She has more.
We're waiting also to hear more specifics from the Vatican. We do know, for instance, that this evening they will be moving the body into the coffin. They have informed us of that. The coffin that the Pope will be buried in is something that he specifically stipulated. He didn't want the one that was done with previous papal funerals. He wanted something simpler. It's a wooden coffin with a zinc encased lining, and so that's what he called for. He also stipulated that in the funeral he does not want his coffin to be raised on a platform. He wants it to be lower down. So he has made specific requests in terms of the funeral. The most significant perhaps is the fact that he wants to be buried not at St. Peter's Basilica behind me, but at St. Mary the Major, or Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the four big basilicas, the main ones here in Rome. And that's because he's had a very close relationship to the icon of Mary that is in that basilica. He always visited the basilica and prayed to the icon before and after every single papal trip that he made, and he even went there directly after he was discharged from the hospital after spending some 38 days there.
Seema, the Pope, when he became Pope in 2013, he said that he wanted his papacy to be more like a field hospital papacy. What did he mean by that, and did he do it?
I think a field hospital, meaning that go to where people need you the most, go to the locations that are suffering. And that's really what he did. I mean, as I said earlier as well, the very first papal trip that he made was to the island of Lampedusa here in Italy, because at the time, obviously, and continuing till today, the concern about migrants arriving on Italian shores, wanting to get to Europe. He was all about helping those that were fleeing poverty and persecution. He said that that was part of the whole project of human dignity, to care for them. And so he would travel. He made many papal trips around the world, going to Papua New Guinea, going to Singapore, to Indonesia, when he made that trip, that 12-day trip to Southeast Asia. So it's not just papal trips in Europe or traditionally strong Catholic countries, but even countries with smaller communities.
Seema, Pope Francis also didn't shy away from being very contrary, from difficult political meetings even. I mean, he has been very critical of the Trump administration over the years, and yet he met with the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance just yesterday, one day before his death.
Exactly. I mean, it was a very brief meeting. The Vatican said it was a short one. It happened during the Easter Mass, and it was like half an hour after that, he was out on the papal balcony. So it really was a quick meeting. They exchanged Easter greetings. That's what we got from the little write-up from the Vatican informing us that they had indeed met. But Mr. Vance did meet with top Vatican diplomats on the Saturday morning, and they discussed key issues that they've deferred upon. Both the Pope and Vatican officials have been critical of the Trump administration and the way that they have dealt with migration in particular, and how they have cracked down on migration and push for deportations. That's something that he is not in favor for and was quite open in saying that. But the Pope was also a shrewd diplomat. He would meet with people. Dialogue for him was always more important than not engaging in talks.
Indeed. And the Pope also dealt with many difficult issues, particularly the issue of corruption in the Catholic Church in recent years. I mean, he was quite outspoken when it came to things like the clergy sexual abuse crisis. Tell us about that.